Story number 1, aiming right at us. Where do I start with this? Well, let me take you back to the 90s when I was about 13 years old. I remember it being winter break and school had just closed for the holidays. With a couple of weeks off from classes, I spent most of my time indoors playing video games or watching TV. One day, I remember going across the street and heading over to my neighbor's house. They had a son around my age, and we would often play sports together. Normally, our thing was to grab a soccer ball or even a football, and we would play outside for hours. However, this day in particular turned out to be different. See, when I arrived, I was greeted by his mother and father telling me he wasn't home. Sorry about that, but our son is with his older brother, and they're over at his cousin's house. Oh, really? Oh, I really wanted to play together today. Do you mind telling me where his cousin lives so I could go play with them? They ended up telling me, and I realized it was a short trip across town. Normally, I would have walked, but considering I just got a new bicycle for Christmas, I figured I would use it. So, it was a bit past noon as I make my way. I should tell you really quickly that this town has about 2,000 people. It's the kind of place where everybody knows one another. Well, when I arrived, they were watching football in their living room. I stayed there watching the game with them, enjoying snacks and just having a good time. Eventually, the game is over, and I want to know if he wants to go play some football. He wasn't really in the mood for it, but he did say he wanted to go into the woods to explore a bit. I was bummed, but at the same time, I thought it would be neat to do something else for a change. We get changed, and we walk a bit out into a stretch of woods. Mind you, we were out here with my friends 22, seeing if we could find any game. At first, we don't really see anything other than just some tracks. After about 30 minutes of walking around, we ended up reaching a road that was on the other side of the tree line. It's when we are about 100 feet away, we can see a car drive by, but we never really bothered remembering it. We get across the road, and we ended up walking into a field that was surrounded by pine trees. My friend sees something small in the trees and fires away, but he misses and runs off into the woods. Oh man, I knew I should have warmed up before I got here. Come on, let's just go back and practice at my place. So we're now making our way back. We're walking up to a fence. That's when we can see the same car from earlier appear and it stops down the road. Well, that's kind of weird. That car kind of looks like the one my cousin has. What's he doing out here? We watch from a far distance as the man takes something out of the back of the car. Then we can hear a loud pop towards us. It's obvious what's going on, and we're in a world of trouble. We started to book it across the fence, and he begins to fire again. As we're running, I can hear the sounds of the metal being hit near us, missing us by just a few inches. Quickly, we jump behind a large rock, and we hide until the noise stops. After about 2 minutes of silence and heart-racing adrenaline, we cautiously look over the rock. We are now able to see as this man gets back in his car and drives away. Shook and obviously lost for words, we carefully make our way back to my friend's cousin's house. It's here we begin to question his cousin as we thought it was him aiming. Sorry, but I have no idea what you two are talking about. I've been here cooking with my mom getting dinner ready for you guys. If anything, I was wondering what was taking you two so long. Even after all these years, I still can't explain the reason behind his actions. Did he maybe mistake us for an animal or something? Regardless, it's scary to look back on thinking we almost bit the dust. By the way, I have another story for all of you, so let's get to that one next. Story number 2, Unexplained Creature in the Woods. Hey there, I'm back with another story just like I promised. Just as a heads up, this is completely different from the encounter my friend and I had in the woods. It took place a couple of years after the first experience, and yes, my friend makes a return in this story. See, after our experience in the woods, we ended up avoiding going there, so finding a new spot was on our list of things to do. Thankfully, our town is surrounded by miles and miles of wilderness. It's not that hard to find a new spot to check out. Therefore, we would end up exploring some cliffs out in the mountains. Oftentimes, we would even camp out at an abandoned campground. Now, I guess it's funny looking back on this now, but we used to drive this large lawnmower that had a trailer on it. There was even a recliner we attached. Oh, how I remember us driving into town and even going into the abandoned campground on that thing. Well, this one evening, my friend and I drive down this dark abandoned road that led us to the campground. Of course, the rider had its lights on, so we weren't really worried about going out so late in the evening. I guess I should mention this now, but when we were there earlier in the day, we were able to smell this very strange rotten smell not too far from our campsite. Along with this, we were able to see some animal tracks walking into the woods. Our best guess was an animal was feeding or something. Moving on. When reaching this campground, we have to park our rider a bit of a ways from the actual site. See, it was guarded by an old fencing that we would have to move in order to get in. So, after opening it, we continued down the path reaching a small shelter. I guess you could call it that. There really wasn't much to it. It was just an opening with a roof over it. It's still big enough for us to sit under and make a campfire though. So we grabbed some of our firewood and we began to make some s'mores and hot dogs. After about an hour of talking and eating, I started to feel strange. I didn't realize it at first, but my friend was having the same feelings as me. We both confirmed that we're feeling like we're not alone out here. It's almost certain that something or someone was watching us. Thinking we're making a big deal of nothing, we nervously laugh it off and we continue telling our stories. And then I was like, yeah, no way you were just about to do— Shh, be quiet, man. Oh, come on, I was just getting to the best part. Seriously, be quiet. Didn't you just hear that? No, I couldn't hear anything other than just me talking and the campfire. We are now both quiet as our eyes are scanning the nearby trees, and even our ears are listening to any signs of movement. We then can hear his footsteps begin to get further away heading towards the hillside. As I get up to check it out, I'm able to see a shadow of something move. Since it was so dark, I wasn't actually able to see what it was that was moving. Well, I decided to grab a flashlight and begin flashing the light into the woods. Big mistake. A few seconds later, I am able to hear something through the trees. They start getting closer, and that's when we start getting scared. My friend and I now look at each other considering our options, and we thought it was pretty obvious what we needed to do. We book it. We head toward our mower, and all the while, we can hear the noise and strange sounds coming from behind us. As we speed away, we are able to hear a strange and loud yell, though something about that scream wasn't normal. It's like it sounded like a person, but at the same time, it also sounded like an animal. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's the best way I can describe it. So, I ended up staying over at my friend's house that night, and all we could do was think about what it was that could have possibly been out there. On top of that, what was up with that bad smell from earlier in the day? We look back on it now, and some of our friends think we might have mistaken the person for a bear. I guess it would explain why the shadows and noise didn't sound like a person. Knowing how protective bears can be, I wonder if a mama bear might have been protecting her cubs thinking we had gotten too close. Who knows? Maybe it was a weird creature like the ones you hear in the folklore. I think that's a little too much of a stretch, but you get the idea. Story number 3. Abandoned Home in the Mountains. Hi there, creepy fox. I have a story for you that I've been wanting to share for a long time. This is a true story that happened to me some time ago. I feel like it needs to be told, and so I hope maybe someone could give me some answers. Also, I gain nothing from making this up, so please, any serious answers or suggestions would be much appreciated. Let's get started. About a month ago, I was heading home with my fiancé and a friend of ours. We live in the mountains, and oftentimes our Friday routine was to go out and drive into the wilderness. There was just something nice about seeing the moonlight above and being surrounded by nothing but the quiet of the night. See, this night we were celebrating my friend's birthday, so we were coming back from a 5-star restaurant. It's about 11 p.m. and we're deciding to take our friend to this abandoned home. Originally, our plan was to go back to our place and watch some scary movies. However, we decided we would take our buddy for a fun little adventure. When we told him about this abandoned home in the mountains, he instantly agreed he wanted to go and check it out. This house, if you wanted to call it that, was constructed back in the 18th century. It's been abandoned since about 1780. There have been countless stories over the years of a girl named Sarah who passed there. On top of this, I guess the building was built over an old Native American Indian ground. This, as you might imagine, adds to the overall spookiness of the location. Of course, most people would have chosen to stay as far away from it as possible, but we were the adventurous types. So, we park our vehicle a fair distance away and we make our way further into the woods. As a heads up, where our car was parked, no one would have been able to see we were in the area. Eventually, after about 5 minutes of walking, we reach a driveway that leads us to the home. The only thing with getting inside, though, is that you have to crawl underneath a fence with an old no trespassing sign. Once on the other side of the fencing, we are now walking through the front door. We have our flashlights on, and we are able to see these scary old ritual-like paintings and drawings on the walls. One thing was for certain, these weren't here the last time I was here. Pretty creepy to say the least, but at least it's not like anybody else was here, right? Well, we start making our way upstairs, and that's when I get a feeling we should leave. Well, it doesn't really seem like there's anything interesting, so let's go home. What, seriously? But we just got here. Oh, don't tell me you're scared. After all, you're the one who recommended this place, didn't you? Come on. With that said, we go ahead and start making our way around to the back of the house. Maybe there might be something back there and I wouldn't feel as nervous. As we turn the corner, I was able to see what looks like an old pickup in the distance, and it's shining a spotlight up towards us. See, we were towards the top of this hill, so any cars would have had to be parked at the very bottom of the field. Now, just remember, we're in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, and it's around midnight. This place is supposed to be abandoned, and there shouldn't be anyone else out here. Well, wouldn't you know it, that we can now see as this old pickup starts driving up the path, and that causes us to scatter around going in different directions. I'm now able to watch as this person begins to shine a flashlight toward the building. I remember that's when I started to get scared, as my heart begins to race with adrenaline. I think what added on top of this was the guy was in the way of us exiting, and we were afraid he might be carrying. This was when I called my girlfriend's mom, who lived close to us.
Hey, it's me. Look, I have to be as quiet as I can, but we're out here by that old abandoned home. There's this really weird guy out here, and he's in the way of us leaving. I thought I saw something in his pocket, so he might be armed. Can you get over here and help us out?
Really, we should have called officers, but we were trespassing, so oops. Eventually, she arrives, which catches the attention of the mysterious visitor we had around us. Soon, another vehicle pulls up right alongside her, and she later told us that she told the man she needed help looking for us. The man just stared at her without saying a single word. She described him as tall, bald with a long beard, and wearing dirty overalls. At this point, she's so scared, she starts running back to her car and he starts chasing. She says she calls the local police as she locks her doors and looks outside at the strange man. Once realizing the door was locked, he walks up the mountain joining the other man. As cliche as it sounds, my phone suddenly turns off. That's when I'm able to hear footsteps, along with what sounds like strange singing, or better yet, chanting. Before I continue, I should mention that my friend and girlfriend were hiding behind another rock closer to the cars. I was still near the home. It seemed that I was the unfortunate one who had to deal with whoever these people were. Well, I suddenly start hearing running up behind me. Thankfully, I'm able to turn around just in time, grabbing a sharp rock, and bam! I hit him so hard he falls back. As I'm now running, I can hear the sounds of sirens and officers arriving to the location. By now, my girlfriend and friend had been found by my mother and the officers, and they're now safe. Now, for some reason, they chose not to come look for me and left soon thereafter. Yeah, let's just say they weren't very helpful back then. I myself was still hiding out here, and here's where things turn unexplained. I'm able to see what looks like a figure of a woman walking further up into the woods. She didn't look like she was involved with these people, so I start heading toward her. The thing is, as I got closer, she is getting further away. Eventually, I lose sight of her, and that's when my phone vibrates. It's my girlfriend's mom, and she's telling me I needed to get back to my car. They soon meet up with me on another road, and they picked me up. But this isn't the end of the story. Soon enough, we are able to see a spotlight behind us, and now there's a vehicle fast approaching. One thing I'm able to notice as we're driving back was the pickup parked in front of the old home. I've since talked to some of the locals, and they told me they chose not to go up there for a reason. I guess in the years since I'd originally explored it, a lot of weird people like to spend their time there. One person in town says there's a weird society that lives up in the mountains, and that's the spot they chose to do their meetings. I'm guessing those two from the vehicles might have been involved in something really bad, but looking back on it now, I wonder if that chanting done was their sign of wanting me next. Who knows? But something else that remains unsolved was the woman I saw in the woods. Who was she? I mean, there were no reports of anybody missing, so I don't know who could have been. Then again, what do you think? Story number 4. He was hiding in the basement. Anyone else out there enjoy some exploring? I know I do. Well, at least I used to. And I figured I would share my story, especially considering that I heard the Creepy Fox was doing a urban exploration themed video. Let me take you back to about a year or so ago. It was myself and my friend, and we were at his house. I'll go ahead and call my friend James in this video. Something to note about James is that he lives out in the countryside. He's about 45 minutes from the largest town, and out here, the nearest neighbors are at least half a mile away. Something I did enjoy about coming out to visit James was that the various trails were perfect for ATVs and bicycles. These trails would take you into forested areas, and they featured trails leading you into the mountains. Something else of importance to mention were the miles of unexplored land we never dared go into. This was mainly due to the fact that the trails were uneven, and there was overgrowth covering the way. We did, however, hear about the abandoned homes and cabins that were located deep in the woods. Might seem creepy to some, but to us, it was a thrilling adventure of a lifetime we most desperately needed. Even so, there was one home in particular we always heard from explorers. Apparently, a lot of strange activity happens there, and there have even been a couple of times that people have said they've ran into people living there. See, we are part of this group on Facebook that posts their experiences, so that's how we found out about it. So, with curiosity, we made our way there, and the first time we explored, we really didn't find anything interesting. We did take some pictures of the building and the graffiti, but all there really was trash and broken bottles. So, when you make your way into the house, you have to go through one of the windows. You see, the door is completely stuck and it won't move. Anyways, about a month later, I wanted to go and explore it again. This time I was bringing a fancier camera along with some snacks so I could stay out there longer. I call up my friend and I tell him about my idea.
Hey, James, I'm gonna be going to that house in the woods near your house. Do you want to go along with me? Sorry, bro, but I'm kind of out of town with my parents right now. See, we went to spend some time with my aunt and uncle, so I'm not home. Sorry. But, I'll tell you what, there's a key underneath the mat. You can go ahead and go inside and grab anything you need if you want. Really? Oh, thanks, man. You're a lifesaver. I'll take you up on that offer.
Yeah, my friend and I were like brothers, and they considered me like part of their family. That's why they didn't mind me going in their house, but that's not really important. I go in his house, and I grab one of his baseball bats, and I make my way to where the home was. Something was off this time as I arrived, though. There was a cheap fencing surrounding the home, along with a sign that said no trespassing. That should have been my first sign to leave, but I told myself this. Look, you drove all the way out here. Don't waste the trip because you got scared. After all, you have a baseball bat, right? If anyone comes at you, well, you can just swing for the fences with that thing. That was dumb thinking, and I think I should have just turned around and left right there and then. Well, as soon as I make my way through the window, I heard knocking upstairs. It did surprise me at first, but I blamed this on the echo of the old home. So, I go ahead and set up my camera and I hit the record button. This is when I start my video, and I'm now telling my friend,
See what you missed? Now I get this place all to myself. And look, I even found this strange folder on the ground. Let me go ahead and open it up now since somebody can't be here with me.
I guess I forgot to mention, but before starting the video, I found a bunch of old papers that weren't here the last time I was here. It contained a bunch of missing persons reports and flyers which instantly sent a chill down my spine. I ended the video by saying,
Well, I'll bring these with me so you can see them for yourself. Yeah, I'll just do that.
About a minute after ending the video and getting a Cliff Bar for my backpack, I hear another noise. This time it sounded like an animal moving around in the trees outside. I decided to look around for the source of the noise, but I don't find the source. I do, however, find a door I haven't seen the previous time I was here. I go to open it, and there's a staircase heading into a dark and creepy basement. I take my camera out, and that's when I begin to film yet again. I'm now downstairs, and I'm scanning around with my night vision camera, and I'm looking at what I can find. There are a bunch of old boxes that are filled with clothing and more documents. It's weird. It's like the person who used to live here just up and left. More than anything, it looked as if this room had been left untouched for years. Well, as I opened up a box, I hear what sounds like glass breaking. This causes me to turn around, and it reveals movement at the corner of the room. As I nervously stand there, a man who I want to say was in his late 40s steps forward with a dark green hoodie. He has a crowbar in one hand, and he just stares at me for what seems like an eternity. Well, it seems like all the bravery I had left, because suddenly I'm booking it upstairs and I'm dropping my poor camera in the process. I don't even bother to go grab it since I don't know what this guy was capable of. I'm only about 5'9", a measly 150 pounds. This guy was easily over 6'5" and 250 pounds minimum. As for the baseball bat, I left it in the living room where I originally left my backpack. I don't even grab that either. Needless to say, I fly out of that house quite literally, and I book it to my bicycle. As I struggle to get on my bicycle, I turn around and I'm able to see the man from the basement, and he was now joined by another person. Both of them looked like they were in their late 40s and looked as if they weren't all there. Safe to say, I ride my way out of the area until I'm at my friend's house. Obviously, my friend didn't believe me when I ended up telling him about it. As proof, I told him to go with me when he got back home a month later. One thing was for sure, I wasn't going to go back there on my own. So yes, my friend and I returned, this time with his new German Shepherd, only to find something completely different. The spot in which the home was at was now gone. It seemed that in the past month the home had been demolished, and now in its place was no trespassing signs and caution tape. Sadly, I never got my stuff back, which is a bummer because I had to buy a new camera. I'm pretty sure those guys who were there had been secretly living there, and it just so happened I bumped into them when I went on my own. One thing is for sure though, I'm giving urban exploration a break for a while. Story number 5. His name was Edward. I guess I'll start off by saying that I could have done better in this situation. I know what you're thinking, but I never really thought anything bad could happen online, so that's why I'm here to warn you all with my story. Next time, be very careful with who you talk to online. See, most of the time they are who they claim to be, but other times it's not exactly the case. Let's just say I got away lucky. So, this took place about 5 years ago, and I'm female by the way. Anywho, one night I remember I was scrolling through Instagram and I was looking at my friend's posts. It's while watching one of my friend's videos I suddenly get a notification. Now, my profile is set to private, so people have to send me a request in order to follow me. His name was Edward, and from the looks of it, he appeared to have people I knew following him as well. On top of this, his profile said he lived in the town next to me, about a 20-minute drive away. Well, that's kind of weird. Maybe I met this guy somewhere. I guess he does look kind of familiar. So, to confirm my suspicions, I scroll through his profile. From the looks of it, all the photos look real to me. Okay, well with that I accepted the follow and I follow him back. From here I go and step into the shower and I get ready to go to bed. About 30 minutes later, I go and grab my phone, and I see there's an unread message. That's weird, I thought. I guess it was a friend sending me a funny picture or something. Well, no, it turned out to be Edward, the guy I just accepted as my Instagram friend. It now showed that he responded within seconds of me accepting his request. I guess he had nothing better else to do. Anyways, his message says,
Hey, you seem pretty nice. Why do I feel like I've met you somewhere before?
I message him back by telling him, yeah, same. I feel like we met at a friend's party or something. I don't know. We continue the conversation and everything's pretty normal, so I continue talking to him. This goes on for a couple of months, and by now I'm starting to get comfortable talking to him. One night he tells me,
Hey, I know this sounds silly, but do you want to be my girlfriend?
I know, I shouldn't have said yes, but I did. The problem was I never even talked to him over the phone, nor ever did we do a video chat. This probably would have been a good thing to do since I wasn't 100% sure this was the guy from the photos. Well, after saying yes to his question, he follows up by telling me,
Well, that's a relief. I guess this means that we should meet up somewhere, right? After all, we're now boyfriend and girlfriend. Actually, wouldn't it be nice to see you in person and hear that voice of yours?
This was when things started to get creepy. See, before meeting up, he wanted to know more personal things. Things like where I exactly lived and what my other social media was. On top of this, he wanted my password. He starts getting more demanding with the information, but I just laugh it off and I ignore him. Even with all of that, I still decided to meet up with him. I of course made sure that the meetup would be in a public place and with a friend by my side. Now, I don't remember how long my friend and I waited there, but it must have been for over an hour. As we're about to get up and leave, I froze. In the distant parking lot, I am able to see someone that looked just like Edward. This was when, for some reason, I started to get really nervous and shaky. I could just feel my heart racing and this overall feeling of worriness. My friend and I just waited there for this person to get closer, and sure enough, it was him. Hi there. I'm guessing you're Edward, right? He doesn't say a single word. He just looks me up and down awkwardly and stands perfectly still. I remember my friend looking over at me and having that expression of, Dude, are you for real? This is the guy you were talking about? I was confused as well, but maybe he was just shy. This was when I recommend we go to the nearby park to get to know each other. Even so, my friend was uneasy. So still dumb us with this stranger, we walk over to the park and we just sat and talked. This was when he started to talk, but he's mumbling in a muffled tone. At times he would grab my arm and he'd pull me against him, but he did it with such force. It's like he was mad or something. I myself didn't say anything since I was afraid he might do something to my friend and I. He's at least 6'3", maybe 240 pounds, and my friend and I are both around 5'3", 115 to 120 pounds. Well, after some awkward talk, he says,
So, when will we be meeting up with your mom and dad, huh?
Sorry, but I don't think we can do that today. Besides, it's getting kinda late. Aren't you gonna miss the bus you were just on? Surprisingly, he agreed, but he left with anger. I was so scared after that, but it didn't really help with the message I got later that evening.
Oh, you're so beautiful. But I just wanted you. Why was your friend there with you? It was just supposed to be you and me.
Excuse me, but what's that supposed to mean?
You heard me. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I was so angry that I ignored him. About 10 minutes later, I received a message from a friend of mine saying that he had photos. I guess he had taken screenshot from their Snapchat stories. So angry at this moment, it turned out that he was following a bunch of my good friends. This was when I tell my buddies that we needed to get rid of him. I bring this up to him, as you might imagine, and he's furious yet again. It's at this moment he is saying things like,
I know where you live, and I know where you work. I've seen those horses you take care of. You can't hide from me.
He even accompanies everything with exact names and addresses. I start crying as I'm ready to call officers. With one last message, I tell him, Look, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to call officers. Don't ever mention my family or those horses at the barn I work at ever again.
Well, I know you very well, so be careful.
As it turned out, he gathered my information from my other social media for well over a year. I now block him, and everyone else I know did the same thing. So yeah, just like I mentioned at the beginning, be very careful with who you talk to online. You never know what people's intentions really are. Story number 6. He wanted me to be quiet. Most of the stories I've heard on your channel involve stories of people who live in small towns. Mine, on the other hand, involves a more populated town. See, I live on a pretty busy street that sees traffic pretty much all day and night. The street I live on connects to a highway where many cars drive onto and off of. I remember one day in particular. I'd been playing outside in the cold and rain, and I ended up getting sick. One thing was for sure, I wasn't going to be going to school the next day, so there I am home with my little brother. Now, my family is pretty large, and every morning I would be used to our mom taking us to school. Since I was feeling a bit better this morning, I go with my mom to drop my brother and sister off at school. After taking them, we drop by Albertsons to do some grocery shopping for the week. My mom made the best soup for when I got sick, and I was definitely looking forward to it when we got home. Anyways, we go home with groceries included, and we start driving down our street. As we're nearing the house, both my mom and I are able to notice something different. The front door is completely left open. My mom now stops the car and she immediately locks it. Myself and my other little brother are just looking at each other in confusion. This was when my mom takes her phone out and she calls dispatch.
Okay, ma'am, remain calm. Please just make sure to stay in your car. We're sending officers now, so they'll go check the property out for you.
My mom wasn't going to listen, and curiosity started to take over. She steps outside and starts to slowly make her way to the backstairs patio. Now, we have glass sliding doors, so you're able to see inside the home. Well, not even 10 seconds after putting her hand on the door, she hears a loud crash from inside. This sound alarmed her so badly, she books it back to the car, locking it once again in the process. About 3 minutes later, a couple of police cruisers show up and they start searching the home. I'd say it was 10 minutes later they come up to us and they tell us, "Sorry, ma'am, but we couldn't find anyone in the house." It was true. Together with the officers, we step inside. Not a single thing was missing. All that was different was some of the furniture being moved around. My mom's laptop was now on the floor open, and some of our DVDs were fallen on the ground. Definitely weird, but I myself couldn't think of anything too malicious. My mother steps into the kitchen with the officers, and I take out my PlayStation Vita. A minute or so later, I started to hear footsteps sounding from the staircase in the neighboring room. I get up and check the noise. Well, guess what I'm face to face with? A man that was dressed completely in dark clothing with a matching ski mask had now walked from upstairs and was staring right at me. I'm on the verge of screaming when suddenly he makes a shh sound. Naturally, I scream like no one's business, and Mom and the officers come running over to me. Naturally, the home intruder runs out the front door, which was still open, by the way. Officers run outside to look for him, but he ends up getting away. The idea he wasn't found gave me nightmares for weeks on end, but officers told my family and I that they were on the lookout for the intruder. Still, with barely any details or leads, it was hard to get a matching description. Even with all of that, my story still isn't over. Fast forward a year or so later, and I'm home alone with my older brother. In this story, we will call my brother Carl. Carl and I were up late, and we were watching movies by ourselves. I forget what we were watching, but I do remember the amazing Domino's pizza we were eating. In case you're wondering, my mother was out visiting my grandparents with my other brother and sister. Carl and I stayed home since we had homework to work on. Mom did tell us that she'd be home around 11 p.m., and for the most part, everything goes well. But then suddenly, we hear noises from the kitchen. "Hey, did you just hear that?" "Yeah, I did. That sounds like the back door opening. And are those footsteps?" Now, our family is pretty trusting, so we honestly thought our mother had returned earlier than planned. Even so, something felt very wrong here. Our mother would usually call out saying she was home. This was when I started to get butterflies in my stomach, and I was getting scared. My brother and I can now hear cupboards being opened and silverware falling to the kitchen floor. After this, we hear the footsteps heading to our second living room, which was down some stairs. This was when my brother and I snap out of it, and we take the opportunity to quietly head upstairs. This was the moment I started crying, and my brother is trying to calm me down, assuring me everything will be okay. Meanwhile, the sounds continued with plates, cups, and other utensils being thrown around. After 5 minutes of nonstop noise and uncertainty, everything falls silent in the house. It's now we're thinking the person had left the house, but that's when we heard it, knocking on our bedroom door. Our best guess was he had tiptoed his way over here, doing all he could to make as little noise as possible. He continues to knock before we can hear the man on the other side saying, "Shh." My brother looks over at me confused, but I suddenly have a flashback to the first time I heard that. We can then hear footsteps heading downstairs and the front door slamming closed. My brother and I sat in the room for about an hour and were wondering on whether or not we should leave the room to get the phone. After all, we don't even know if he's still in the house. Eventually, my mom arrives with our brother and sister, only to find that we were in our room completely lost for words. 6 months later, we moved to a different state and we've never experienced anything like that again. I'll never know who that man was or why he went into our house. One thing is for sure, though. I'll never forget that shh sound that he made. Story number 7. Late Night Highway Encounter. This story happened in Arizona in fall of 2015. I'm male, and at the time I was 18 years old on the football team. I was the kind of guy who was never scared of anything. Even so, there was one night in particular I would never forget. This is that story and the events that took place. It was a Friday afternoon and I was at football practice with my buddies. We had just finished practice and our coach dismissed us for the evening. It was a rough practice session, and to reward ourselves, we went over to the local pizza parlor to grab some dinner. It's here we sat and talked for a couple of hours until we got bored. One of my friends mentions that we should go to the new arcade that was just opened, so we go and play there for about an hour until it's around 6 p.m. I was about to head home, but that's when I received a call from another buddy of mine. We will call him Jacob.
Hey man, Jonathan's having a party right now. Do you want to come over and spend some time with us? Come on, we've got a bunch of food left over. I know you're hungry.
I was kinda tired and still full from the pizza, but I figured I could go visit Jacob and Jonathan for a little while. After all, tomorrow is Saturday, so I didn't have to worry about waking up early or anything. The party was out in the desert about an hour from town. It was located at a campground my friends and I frequented every so often. By now, my football buddies had all gone home, and it was just myself and my girlfriend who I invited to go with me. Oh yeah, and before I forget to mention, I was using my mom's Toyota Tacoma to get around. So, we go there, we have some fun with our friends, and we're now returning home around midnight. On our way home, we're having to go down this dark and lonely stretch of road that is as barren as you might imagine. It's nothing but desert apart from the occasional house you might see in the distance. We're going around 80, and that's when my girlfriend spots something on the road a fair distance in front of us. I slow down as we started to get closer, and we notice there's a car parked idling. My girlfriend and I look at each other in confusion as suddenly a woman gets out of the car. We now watch as she starts making her way over to our car, and that's when she tells us, "Hey, I'm really sorry to bother the two of you, but do you know how to use a spark plug by any chance? Do you mind stepping out of your car and helping me out here?" Her wanting us to get out of the car should have been the first sign something was wrong, but I ignore these feelings, blaming it on the time of the night. "Yeah, sure, I know how to use one. Come on, let me help you out." Big mistake. I step out, and that's when I noticed her vehicle, which I thought had stopped working, suddenly turned on. This distraction was enough for a man I hadn't seen to make his move. I suddenly hear my girlfriend yelling in another man's voice. I turn around, and there's a man reaching into the passenger's window where my girlfriend was. In that moment, I remember the .38 my mom kept in the car that I borrowed from her. So I look into the driver's side pocket, and I grab it. He suddenly jumps away as I get inside the car. That's when I can hear footsteps in the dirt beside the road. Just so you know, my lights didn't light the desert next to me, so I couldn't see if anyone else might be hiding here. Well, I'm now face to face with another set of people that are standing by the road. Needless to say, I floor it. but not before hearing a loud pop and something hitting the back of my Toyota. To this day, I have no idea who those people were and what their intentions really were. One thing is for sure. I advise to be careful next time you're on an empty road in the middle of the desert. Just be careful, friends. Story number 8. Sleepover turns into a nightmare. Boy, do I have a Home Alone story for all of you. This was actually pretty recent. It took place about 4 months ago, and my parents had been out for the weekend. It was myself and a couple of other friends, and we were having a sleepover. Now, to quickly describe my home, it's in a pretty quiet and safe suburb. Actually, one nice thing about my neighborhood was how quiet it was. It featured elderly couples who rarely made any noise. This was perfect for me since I recorded music, but that's besides the point. The idea is that barely anything happens here. I think the only thing that happened was an argument between some neighbors. I guess they were complaining that their trash bins kept getting knocked over, but it turned out to be a neighborhood cat. Anyways, my friends and I had been up watching Gossip Girl, and we're chatting about all the latest rumors at school. Finally, around midnight, we all fall asleep one by one. Everything is quiet, and it's about 2 a.m. That's when we were all brought awake to an extremely loud noise on my bedroom window. What was that noise? Do you think somebody got inside? Oh, come on, Christine. You're making a huge deal. It's probably just the cats fighting outside or something. The noise did scare me a bit, but I think the explanation of the cat was a great way to calm us all down. We managed to convince ourselves nothing serious is going on, and we go back to sleep. About half an hour later, we're all once again awoken to the same noise. Here's the thing, though. This wasn't your average ordinary bang or knock. No, we are able to hear 3 rapid knocks, almost as if they were in a pattern. Naturally, we start panicking since we had no way of knowing what the actual source of the noise was. I remember we all run upstairs and we hide in the attic. This was when I called my dad and I told them about what was happening.
Dad? Are you there? Yes, honey. What's wrong? You sound scared. I think there's somebody in the house, and I think they're trying to get inside. My friends and I, we're hiding in the attic. Okay, stay calm. What I need you to do is I need you to call the police, and they will help you out, okay? I need you to be brave for me.
So I end the call with my dad, and I now call the police station.
Hello, thank you for calling dispatch. This is Natalie speaking. Do you have an emergency to report? Yes, I need your help. My friends and I, we heard noises outside our house. We're home alone, and we're not sure what to do. Okay, where are you right now? And are your doors and windows locked? Yeah, they are, but please, just hurry up and get here already. Okay, we're sending officers to come check things out. They should be there soon, okay?
If only we would have known that soon would have turned out to be like 20 minutes. I honestly thought they didn't write my address down correctly or something. Well, in the meantime we wait. My friend Christine and I got the courage to check the house. Yeah, not a smart idea, I know. Rachel, our third friend, would end up waiting in the attic with the golf club we had. So, Christine and I start scanning the rooms one by one with our ice pick that we got from the kitchen. The only thing is, we find no one. However, as we make our way to the back door, we can see the door handle begin to shake unexpectedly. This was when the loud bang started yet again. Immediately, we book it upstairs into my parents' bedroom and we lock the door. Now, something about my parents' room was that you could look out into the backyard. We end up taking a look in the back, and that's when we can see a tall figure standing in our yard. He was tall, skinny, with a ski mask on. He appeared to have what looked like a crowbar in his hand, which instantly made us freeze. Moments later, we started to hear sirens, and that's when this guy takes off running. Note that Rachel was on the phone with the dispatch as we explored the house. Natalie now tells us that it's okay to step outside, and so we do. When we meet up with the officers, we explain what had happened, and they tell us they will look into it. Apparently, somebody was trying to break into another home a couple of nights ago, but they ran away after the police were called. So, I guess my question is this. Who was this person? And was it possible he knew we were home alone? I'm not sure, but nothing like that has ever happened to us again. Story number 9, 3 a.m. phone call. Here's a little background information. I'm an 18-year-old female just starting my first college semester in Southern California. I'm originally from Montana, but I moved out here to study and earn a degree in business. Seeing as I would be paying for my own school with the help of my parents, I ended up working a part-time job at a Ralph's grocery store about 10 minutes from campus. I mentioned these details because I never had the time to talk to people or even really make friends. Don't get me wrong, I did make some good acquaintances in my classes, but I never did much with them due to my busy schedule. There would be times I'd get invited to parties, but I would always have to say no. Of course, seeing that I worked at a grocery store and in customer service, I naturally got a bunch of people wanting my phone number, which I mainly ignored. It was about a month ago, and I just finished a late night at Ralph's. The day was tough. I'd woken up around 6 a.m. and I started school that day at 8. I then was there until 5 p.m. and I had to go to work. By the time I got back to my dorm, it's almost midnight. Tired and grumpy, I awoke the next morning with an unexpected noise. It was the sound of my cell phone ringing. I guess in me being tired the previous evening, I forgot to put my cell phone on silent as I was hearing the chimes of bells. The only thing is that by the time I realized what was going on, the person on the other line had already stopped calling. Ugh, man, who in the world is calling me this early? Don't they realize what time it is? I didn't even bother to check who was calling. I figured it was a wrong number and I went back to sleep. About 30 minutes later, I'm once again awoken to the sound of my ringtone. Oh, come on, really? What do you want? This time the phone number was different, but it had the area code that matched my city. I remember trying to think of who could have possibly had my number.
Hello? Sorry, but it's really early in the morning. What do you want?
There is no response, but that's the thing though. The only people who had my number were my coworkers and my parents. I do have a roommate named Abby, but she wasn't home at the time. Also, if she was calling, it would have shown her name on the screen. Not that I think she would be calling me this early.
Look, I don't know who this is, but you have the wrong number, okay? Bye now. Wait, don't put the phone down just yet.
That voice sent chills down my spine, and that sudden grumpy, tired mood I was in turned into anxiety.
I'm sorry, but who is this? How do you have my number? Come on, Allison, don't be like that. You already know who I am, don't you?
I froze. It's like a switch in my head just clicked, and I was able to match the voice. Yes, it was weird that the person on the other end knew my name, but what I later found out made things that much more worse.
It's me, Carlos from Ralph's. You know, the guy you totally ignored when I wanted your phone number.
I honestly should have just blocked his number right there and then, but I wanted to get answers to how he got my number.
How did you get my number, Carlos? That's my secret. But if you really must know, I guess I could tell you. Remember that one evening I got kicked out of your store? Well, I was in the back room and I happened to notice that board with the phone numbers. I saw your name and your number there, so I took a picture of it and saved it. You know, I thought you lived pretty far away, but after finding you on social media, I realized you're going to school at the nearby university. Why didn't you tell me? Oh yeah? Well, if you know so much about me, then why don't you prove it?
Big mistake. He starts listing family members' names, addresses, and even the school I'm at. That's not what got to me. All of a sudden, I start hearing knocking at the front door. This was followed by Carlos saying,
"Do I have your attention now?"
He then lets out a laugh I would never forget. At this point, I'm at a loss of words as I immediately get in line with officers. It's on the line when I suddenly hear what sounds like a window breaking. I then can hear footsteps in the living room. This was followed by cupboards being opened and things being thrown around. All the while, I can hear somebody in the other room saying, "Allison, where are you? I know you're in here somewhere." This lasted for about 5 minutes until I can hear footsteps reaching my bedroom door. He calls out to me yet again as I hold on to a lamp ready to use it if I had to. Really, what else was I going to do? Thankfully, I'm able to hear sirens approaching, and that's when I can hear he books it out of the house. But by the time they arrive, Carlos is long gone. I tell officers about what happened, and I gave them a description of Carlos. They told me that I should stay over at a family or friend's house in the meantime, which I ended up doing. Now, over the course of a couple of days, I received a bunch of strange and creepy messages on my Facebook account. It was Carlos, and he told me he wasn't done with me just yet. Well, it would be the end, because he was caught a week later. Not sure if he got lazy or he was overconfident, but I was at work closing with my coworker Amy. Carlos suddenly came into the store and started talking to Amy, wanting to know if I was there that night. She said no, but that she could call me if he waited at the front of the store. I myself was in the back room. Well, we instead called security, who ended up holding him until officers arrived. As it turned out, Carlos wasn't actually his name. We later found out that he had been responsible for stalking other college students and breaking into their dorms a couple of years ago. See, I knew it. He did end up having a history to him. Well, in the end, I'm just glad I don't have to deal with him anymore. Before we get to the last story, I just want to say thank you once again for making it this far in the video. Remember, if you'd like to see more, including previews and exclusive content, then make sure to be following me over on my Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. Thanks. On to the last story. Story number 10. Abandoned Campsite in the Woods. When I was 15 years old, so 3 years ago, I used to live in a town in Northern California. It's here I met a good friend of mine who I still talk to on occasion. We will call her Valerie. Valerie and I did pretty much everything together, and since we went to the same school, this meant being in the same classes. Actually, that's how we met. I met her on the first day of school after I had transferred in. It's like nobody else wanted to be my friend, but when she saw that I was lonely, she started talking to me. We ended up connecting with our love for movies and video games, and strangely enough, camping and exploring. Well, one winter afternoon, I was at her house, and we had been watching a marathon of SpongeBob. Seriously, can't go wrong with the classic episodes. Anywho, the marathon of SpongeBob had ended, and it's now around 4 p.m. Sunset would be in about 2 hours, but Valerie still wanted to go outside and play. That's when she mentioned this forested area that she once visited with her uncle. It's about a 30-minute bicycle ride into the woods, but there's this really neat valley you can check out. It's here there's an abandoned campground that featured a couple of caves and abandoned cabins. Seemed scary at first, but she reassured me that it wasn't really a big deal. Well, one thing was for sure. I wasn't sure where we were heading, but I followed Valerie as we rode our bicycles to the other side of town. Once we reach this old park, we go behind a fence line that leads us into said woods. She was right. There was a valley that went down alongside a road. However, as we started to reach the bottom, the road started to get difficult to traverse. It just had recently rained, so the ground was uneven. Not a crazy amount where it was impassable, but still a challenge. It also didn't help that there was a bunch of branches and trees in the way. Eventually, I'm able to see the area she's talking about, and it's absolutely beautiful. Yes, the place was abandoned, and there were even some caution signs. I found this odd, as Valerie had told me that these weren't here the last time she was with her uncle. On top of this, it looked as if there were signs of people living here, as there were some tents and trash scattered around. Now, I guess it could have been some people camping, but why would they be camping in a spot that says to keep out? I guess we weren't listening to the signs either. Anyways, we parked our bicycles and we go and explore some of the cabins. Valerie tells me that some of these cabins were built back in the 1940s, and they've been standing here since. I guess it did explain the state they were currently in. The one thing that did make us uneasy were the messages and ritual-like symbols written on the interior of one of them. After about 20 minutes of checking out the cabins, we head to this cave that was close by. It was neat. There was an underground pond inside, and just as we're about to leave the cave, that's when we can hear an echo behind us. We both stop and we look at each other. It's weird. The echo didn't sound like a rock falling or our footsteps. It sounded like a voice. Now, mind you, we were talking, but not in the moment the voice was heard. We continue to walk again, and that's when the voice is heard once again. This time, it's more clear, and we can hear his footsteps start approaching us from behind. And that's when Mystery Man number 1 shows up. Well, there's no doubt he'd been living out here since he didn't look like a camper or even an explorer.
Do you two have any money on you by any chance I can borrow? Actually, scratch that. What are the two of you doing out here? Are your parents around?
We thought these questions were pretty creepy, but we wrote it off as just his curiosity. As not to make him mad, we have a friendly conversation with him, and we told him our parents were nearby. He seemed content with our response, albeit a bit frustrated, and then heads back into the cave. Okay, just some guy out here, whatever. However, it's not the end just yet. When we arrive at our bicycles, we hear the man yelling over at us again. This time, he is joined by another stranger who looked about the same. Skinny, dirty clothing, long hair and beard with a scar on his cheek. Both of them now look at us and they demand we stay with them. We say no, and that's when we can see one of them has something sharp in their pocket. It's obvious these two are up to no good, and that's when my friend and I book it. Full of adrenaline, my friend and I pedal those bicycles like we were in the Olympics. I guess it was helpful that we did cross-country together. Also, in case you're wondering, the valley wasn't that steep, so we didn't have much of a challenge getting away from them. Thankfully, we had enough of a lead that they ended up stopping about halfway. Eventually, we make it back to our home and we try to put it behind us. I guess there was a reason why the area was abandoned. Seemed to us that whoever those two were had taken the opportunity to make that campsite their home. Whether or not they were just scaring us to leave, or they were up to something else, we may never know. Either way, we never did go back.